Hello, my beautiful Libra. I'm really glad you're here today. I hope you can take a deep breath, settle into this moment, and simply allow yourself to receive whatever resonates with your heart. If you enjoy these readings and you'd like to support the channel, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your zodiac sign or a little bit about what you're experiencing in the comments. I always love reading your stories because every journey carries its own wisdom. As I begin laying these cards on the table, something feels different. The energy isn't loud. It isn't rushed. It's almost as if someone has been standing in the middle of their own life, quietly looking around, wondering how they ended up so far away from what truly matters. That feeling becomes even stronger as the Judgment card appears. It feels like someone has reached a moment where avoiding the truth is becoming harder than facing it. This person seems to have spent a great deal of time reflecting on the choices they've made. Maybe they believed they were protecting themselves. Maybe they convinced themselves that waiting was easier than risking disappointment. Whatever their reasons were, those reasons don't seem to comfort them anymore. Instead, they keep returning to the same thought, and somehow that thought always leads back to you. Yeah, that's the interesting part. The more they try to understand their own heart, the more your presence quietly rises to the surface. Not because you're demanding attention, not because you're chasing them. It feels more like your energy has become impossible to ignore, even during ordinary moments, when they're driving somewhere, making coffee, or sitting alone after a long day. Something gently reminds them of you. The Justice card enters the reading, and for Libra, its presence feels especially meaningful today. I'm not looking at this as punishment or reward. I'm looking at someone who is beginning to recognize the imbalance they've created within themselves. They may be asking questions they avoided before. Why did I pull away? Why was I so afraid? What was I protecting? Those questions don't always arrive with immediate answers, but they open a door that had remained closed for a long time. Okay, once that door opens, things begin to change. The Hermit appears next, and I almost see this person withdrawing from outside opinions. Instead of listening to everyone else's advice, they seem far more interested in listening to the quiet voice they've been trying to silence. Sometimes growth doesn't happen in crowded rooms. Sometimes it happens during the moments nobody else ever sees. It feels like they're replaying conversations between the two of you. They're remembering little details they overlooked before, the kindness you showed, the patience you carried, the way you never demanded that they become someone different. Ironically, that acceptance may be exactly what inspired them to want to become better on their own. Oh my God, that's a beautiful realization when it happens. Growth that comes from fear rarely lasts. Growth that comes from love has a completely different feeling. I don't get the sense that this person is trying to become someone else just to impress you. It feels much deeper than that. They're beginning to understand that if they continue repeating the same emotional patterns, they'll keep creating the same lonely outcomes. Somewhere inside, they're recognizing that change isn't really about winning you back. It's about becoming someone who no longer runs from genuine connection. As these cards settle together, there's almost a quiet conversation taking place between their heart and their mind. Their mind still wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants to know exactly how everything will unfold. But their heart seems tired of waiting for perfect conditions. It simply wants honesty. Then the Ace of Cups gently enters the reading. I always pay attention to how the energy shifts when this card arrives. Everything suddenly feels softer. The walls that looked impossible to climb don't seem quite as intimidating anymore. There's a willingness to imagine a different future, one built on openness instead of hesitation. That doesn't necessarily mean every obstacle disappears overnight. Life rarely unfolds that way, but it does suggest that something inside this person is beginning to flow again after feeling emotionally blocked for quite some time. Libra, what stands out to me most isn't dramatic action. It's quiet transformation. Sometimes the biggest turning points happen long before anyone else notices. They happen when someone finally admits the truth to themselves. They happen when someone stops blaming circumstances and starts taking responsibility for the direction of their own life. This reading carries that feeling. Someone appears to be reaching the point where they no longer want fear to make their decisions. Instead of asking whether love is safe, they're beginning to ask whether continuing without it is really the life they want. Those are two very different questions. And somehow, every road they explore seems to circle back to the same place. Back to the same connection. Back to the same memories. Back to the possibility that what they've been searching for has quietly been standing in front of them all along. Something feels different around this connection because the energy is becoming much less crowded. Friends, as I lay the Seven of Swords on the table, I don't immediately think about one person. I almost feel like layers are peeling away. Hidden conversations, quiet influences, opinions that never belonged to either of you. They're slowly losing their power. It almost feels as though someone has been carrying voices that were never truly their own. Every time they wanted to move toward you, another opinion appeared. Someone questioned their choices. Someone suggested they should wait. Someone hinted that you weren't the right person or that this connection would never work the way they hoped. Those words may have sounded convincing for a while, but something inside them no longer accepts those stories without questioning them. Yeah, that's what catches my attention. There seems to be a growing awareness that not everyone who offers advice actually wants to see them happy. Some people simply wanted to keep everything exactly as it was because change made them uncomfortable. Whether this came from a former partner, a friend, family, or another outside influence, I can't say for certain. What I can feel is that your person is beginning to recognize the difference between guidance and control. The Justice card appears again, and the atmosphere shifts into something surprisingly calm. There isn't a feeling of revenge here. Nobody seems interested in proving another person wrong anymore. Instead, it's almost like they're quietly placing every relationship in front of themselves and asking one simple question: does this bring peace into my life? If the answer feels uncertain, they don't seem nearly as willing to hold on to it as they once were. Okay, that's a very different mindset. People can only influence us for so long before our own heart starts asking deeper questions. Your person appears to be entering that stage. They may still hear outside opinions, but those opinions no longer carry the same weight they once did. It's almost as if their own inner voice has finally become louder. The Devil card arrives, and I notice something interesting. I'm not focusing on fear, I'm noticing attachment, old habits, familiar patterns, situations that were comfortable simply because they were familiar. Sometimes people stay inside emotional cycles because they already know how those stories end. Starting over feels uncertain, even when staying where they are no longer feels healthy. Oh my God, that realization can change everything. I'm sensing someone beginning to recognize the invisible strings that have quietly pulled on their decisions for a long time. Maybe they worried too much about disappointing other people. Maybe they kept trying to meet expectations that never truly belonged to them. Maybe they confused keeping everyone happy with keeping themselves at peace. Those two things aren't always the same. Your energy seems to be showing them another possibility, not by forcing them to change, but simply by existing in a way that feels honest. Sometimes authenticity gives people permission to become authentic themselves. That may be one of the strongest influences you've had without even realizing it. There is also this feeling that someone who once appeared very confident suddenly doesn't seem nearly as convincing anymore. Their words don't carry the same authority. Their attempts to steer the situation begin losing momentum because your person has started paying closer attention to actions rather than promises. That feels important. Actions leave a different kind of imprint on the heart. As these cards continue unfolding, I notice your person becoming much more protective of their emotional space. They don't appear interested in unnecessary conflict. They aren't trying to argue with everyone who disagrees. Instead, they seem willing to quietly step away from environments that constantly leave them feeling confused or emotionally exhausted. The Six of Swords settles onto the table, and everything becomes noticeably lighter. Movement doesn't always happen with dramatic announcements. Sometimes it begins with one quiet decision. One phone call that never gets returned. One invitation politely declined. One unhealthy conversation that finally comes to an end. One boundary that had never existed before. Those little moments can slowly reshape an entire future. Libra, I also feel this gentle determination growing inside your person. They don't seem interested in allowing fear, guilt, or outside pressure to decide what happens next. There is a quiet confidence developing that wasn't visible before. It isn't loud enough for everyone else to notice yet, but it feels very real beneath the surface. Yeah, that's the word I keep hearing. Real, not perfect. Not rushed, just real. Whoever this person is, they appear to be discovering that love becomes much clearer once unnecessary noise begins fading into the background. The more they remove emotional distractions, the easier it becomes to recognize who consistently brings peace into their life and who constantly creates uncertainty. That recognition doesn't necessarily answer every question overnight. Life rarely unfolds in straight lines. Even so, I can't ignore how these cards seem to lean in one direction. There is a willingness to leave behind emotional weight that no longer belongs in their future. There is a willingness to stop carrying responsibilities that were never theirs to begin with. The path between the two of you doesn't suddenly become effortless, but it does seem to become easier to see. Obstacles that once looked permanent begin feeling surprisingly temporary. Old influences gradually lose their hold, and your person's attention naturally starts returning to what feels genuine instead of what simply feels familiar. A quiet realization seems to settle over this reading as the Five of Cups finds its place on the table. The feeling isn't dramatic or chaotic. It's much more personal than that. It's the kind of silence people experience when they finally stop defending their past decisions and simply allow themselves to see them for what they were. I keep sensing someone replaying moments that once felt ordinary. Conversations they ended too quickly. Opportunities they let slip away because they believed there would always be another chance. It's almost as if they're looking through an old photo album in their mind, noticing details they completely missed while living through them. Your presence keeps appearing in those memories, not because every memory was perfect, but because they can finally recognize the consistency you brought into their life. There seems to be an understanding growing inside them that genuine care often arrives quietly. It doesn't always demand attention. Sometimes it simply shows up day after day, offering patience, encouragement, and kindness without asking for recognition in return. The Six of Cups appears beside those thoughts, and the atmosphere softens even more. I don't only see nostalgia here, I see appreciation. The kind that develops after enough time has passed for someone to compare appearances with authenticity. They may remember how you celebrated their victories without making them feel indebted. They may remember how you listened instead of rushing to judge. Small moments that once seemed insignificant begin carrying much greater emotional weight. Funny how the heart has a way of preserving what truly matters, even when the mind tries to move on. Yeah, that's what this feels like. There is a growing awareness that your value was never based on grand gestures. It lived inside the little things, the quiet encouragement, the steady support, the way you remained genuine even when life became complicated. Those qualities may not have seemed extraordinary at the time, but from where they stand today, they appear incredibly rare. Oh my God! I almost feel them asking themselves why they didn't recognize that sooner. Regret has an interesting way of changing perspective. It doesn't always arrive to punish us. Sometimes it simply reminds us what deserves to be protected if life offers another opportunity. As I place the King of Pentacles into the reading, the energy becomes noticeably steadier. Emotional reflection begins transforming into intention. There is less uncertainty surrounding what they want and much more curiosity about how they can become someone capable of protecting what they value instead of taking it for granted. This doesn't feel like someone chasing perfection. It feels like someone questioning the version of themselves they have been presenting to the world. Were they dependable when it mattered? Did they speak honestly? Did their actions match their feelings? Those questions seem far more important to them than proving they were right. That shift feels significant. People often think healing begins the moment pain disappears, but sometimes healing begins the moment accountability enters the conversation. Without blaming themselves for everything, they appear willing to acknowledge the places where they could have shown up differently. Your energy seems to inspire that reflection naturally, not through pressure, not through guilt, simply through the example you've already been living. Temperance gently completes this part of the reading, and the entire atmosphere becomes calmer. There's no rush, no frantic attempt to fix every mistake overnight. Instead, I sense someone learning that meaningful change usually happens one honest decision at a time. Perhaps they've started choosing different conversations. Perhaps they're becoming more patient with themselves. Perhaps they're allowing old disappointments to lose their grip little by little. Whatever the exact circumstances may be, the emotional landscape looks much healthier than it once did. Libra, something else stands out to me here. This person doesn't seem focused only on what they lost. They're becoming increasingly aware of what could still be created. That's a completely different mindset. One looks backward with hopelessness, the other looks forward with humility. There is also a gentle feeling that they want to contribute rather than simply receive. They may be asking themselves how they can bring more stability, more consistency, and more honesty into any future they hope to build. Those questions usually come from someone who has started valuing connection in a deeper way than before. The cards almost seem to whisper that relationships become stronger when both people feel emotionally safe enough to be themselves. I sense your person beginning to understand that safety isn't created through promises alone. It's built through countless ordinary moments where trust quietly grows over time. A new foundation appears to be forming inside their heart before anything changes on the outside. Brick by brick, thought by thought, choice by choice, they're constructing a different version of what love could look like. Whether they fully understand the journey ahead or not, there is a quiet willingness to stop measuring life by old disappointments and start measuring it by the possibility of becoming someone who can truly cherish what matters most. A quiet sense of readiness begins to settle over the cards, and it's surprisingly gentle. There isn't any frantic energy here. Nobody seems interested in chasing, convincing, or forcing an outcome anymore. Instead, I feel someone standing at the edge of a decision they've postponed for far too long, finally realizing that waiting any longer won't bring them the clarity they've been searching for. The Page of Cups appears first, and the atmosphere immediately softens. This feels like someone rehearsing conversations in their mind before they ever speak them out loud. They may be wondering what they should say, how they should say it, or whether you'll even want to hear from them. It's almost sweet in a way, because beneath all of those questions is a very sincere desire to be emotionally honest. For quite some time, they may have believed silence was protecting them. Silence felt safer than vulnerability. Silence couldn't be rejected. But something has shifted inside their heart, and the silence that once felt comfortable has started feeling much heavier than the truth itself. Yeah, that's a powerful place to reach. The more they imagine keeping their feelings hidden, the more they realize they're only creating distance between themselves and the connection they genuinely care about. It's almost like every unsent message, every unfinished conversation, every moment they chose not to speak has quietly accumulated until it became impossible to ignore. I don't necessarily see someone rushing to your door tomorrow. The energy feels much more thoughtful than impulsive. This is someone who wants their words to carry meaning. They don't want another conversation filled with uncertainty. If they reach out, it feels as though they want you to hear something authentic rather than something spoken out of fear. The Knight of Cups joins the reading, and the emotional current becomes much stronger. I notice movement, but it's movement guided by intention instead of emotion alone. There is a willingness to cross the space that has existed between the two of you, whatever that space may represent. Physical distance, emotional distance, misunderstandings, or simply time itself. Oh my God, it's almost as though they're beginning to picture a future instead of only remembering the past. That changes everything. When people stop asking themselves what they lost and begin asking themselves what they could still build, their entire perspective transforms. I sense that happening here. Their attention seems to be moving toward possibilities rather than regrets. As I place the Hierophant onto the table, another layer of this story becomes visible. This person doesn't appear interested in temporary excitement anymore. They seem drawn toward something stable, something meaningful, something that can continue growing instead of fading away. Whether they fully understand it or not, their heart appears to be searching for a connection that feels dependable. There is also the feeling of guidance surrounding them. They may find themselves speaking with someone they genuinely respect. It could be an older family member, a trusted mentor, a close friend with life experience, or simply someone whose opinion has consistently brought wisdom instead of confusion. What's interesting is that this advice doesn't feel controlling. It feels grounding. Rather than telling them what choice to make, this person may simply encourage them to be honest with themselves. Sometimes that's the only guidance we truly need. When someone finally stops asking everyone else how they should feel, they begin hearing the answer that has been quietly waiting inside them all along. Okay, I really like that energy. The cards don't show someone trying to become perfect before reaching out. They show someone becoming more genuine. There is a huge difference between those two things. Perfection creates distance because it never arrives. Authenticity creates connection because it allows two imperfect people to meet each other honestly. The Three of Pentacles completes this part of the reading, and I immediately think about partnership. Not one person carrying the entire relationship. Not one person constantly giving while the other only receives. This feels much more balanced than that. It feels like someone beginning to understand that lasting love is created through mutual effort, shared trust, and everyday choices. Your person may even find themselves imagining ordinary moments rather than dramatic ones. Sitting together after work, solving problems as a team, celebrating small victories, supporting one another through difficult seasons. Funny enough, those simple moments often become the strongest foundations for something lasting. Libra, there's another feeling I can't ignore. This person seems ready to become someone you can rely on, instead of someone you constantly have to wonder about. Reliability appears far more important to them than making grand promises. They would rather show consistency over time than impress you with beautiful words that disappear tomorrow. That quiet determination carries a warmth that's difficult to overlook. Their heart appears to be opening one careful step at a time, not because someone else demanded it, but because they've finally reached a place where honesty feels lighter than hiding. Every thoughtful choice they make seems to move them a little closer toward the kind of connection they've secretly hoped could exist. One built on openness, respect, and the willingness to keep choosing each other as the story continues to unfold. A beautiful sense of alignment begins to settle over this reading as the lovers reveals itself. The energy doesn't feel loud or dramatic. It feels intentional. It's almost like two paths that wandered in different directions for a while are slowly finding their way back toward the same horizon. What stands out isn't only the connection between two people, it's the connection each person is beginning to build with their own truth. Your person appears to be reaching a place where love no longer feels like something they have to fear or avoid. Instead, it feels like something worth choosing with open eyes. That choice carries weight because it isn't being made from loneliness or uncertainty. It feels rooted in everything they've learned along the way. Yeah, sometimes the strongest relationships begin with someone finally deciding to stop running from what their heart has been whispering all along. As I look at these cards together, I don't sense someone chasing a fantasy. I sense someone becoming willing to participate in something real. There is a quiet difference between wanting romance and wanting a life with someone. This reading leans much more toward the second feeling. The Justice card appears once again, almost like a familiar friend returning to remind us that every experience has brought its own lesson. For Libra, this card carries a particularly comforting energy today. It feels as though life is gently encouraging balance to return where confusion once existed. Not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, but because honesty is finally taking the place of hesitation. Your person may even find themselves looking back at the choices they've made without trying to rewrite history. There seems to be acceptance growing inside them. Acceptance of what happened. Acceptance of what couldn't be changed. Most importantly, acceptance that the future still holds possibilities if they're willing to approach it differently. Oh my God, that's such a peaceful shift. When someone stops fighting reality, they finally have enough energy to begin creating something new. The Hierophant settles into the reading with a sense of quiet commitment. I don't immediately think about ceremonies or labels. I think about consistency, shared values, the willingness to keep showing up, especially on ordinary days when life isn't asking for grand gestures. Those everyday moments often become the strongest evidence of genuine love. It feels as though your person has started imagining what life could actually look like beside you. Not only the exciting moments, but the peaceful ones too. Sharing morning coffee, laughing over something completely unimportant, supporting each other through stressful weeks, growing older without feeling the need to pretend to be anyone else. Those simple images seem far more meaningful than dramatic fantasies. Libra, I also noticed that your energy throughout this reading has remained remarkably steady. You haven't needed to convince anyone of your worth. You haven't needed to compete for attention. There is something quietly beautiful about the way you've continued becoming yourself, even when life may have asked you to be patient longer than you expected. Sometimes patience can feel invisible while we're living it, yet these cards suggest that kindness leaves a lasting impression, even when nobody acknowledges it right away. Compassion has a way of reaching places that force never can. The care you've offered, the respect you've shown, and the love you've chosen to express, without trying to control another person's journey, all seem to have created something meaningful beneath the surface. The Ten of Cups gently completes the spread, and the atmosphere feels wonderfully calm. Rather than promising a specific outcome, this card seems to invite hope. Hope that emotional fulfillment can grow where sincerity exists. Hope that two people who have learned important lessons separately may eventually recognize the value of walking forward together. There could be a heartfelt conversation waiting somewhere ahead. There could be an invitation to rebuild trust. There could simply be a moment where feelings that remained unspoken finally find their voice. Whatever form it takes, it feels connected to authenticity more than perfection. Your person appears ready to welcome change instead of resisting it. They seem willing to step into your world with greater openness, hoping to become someone who adds peace rather than uncertainty to your life. That intention alone carries a very different energy from the one that surrounded this connection before. As this reading comes to a close, I'm reminded that love often grows in quiet places long before anyone can see the first signs of it. Hearts change in silence. Perspectives soften over time. Choices become clearer through experience rather than pressure. Whether every piece of this message resonates today or only a small part speaks to you, trust your own intuition above all else. Take what feels meaningful, leave behind what doesn't, and allow your own path to unfold at its own pace. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with me, Libra. You truly mean a lot to me, and I can't wait to see you again in the next reading. Until then, take good care of yourself. Bye for now.